Does it, is it a pleasing quilt? Now, when I say pleasing, the way someone puts colors together is their choice, not mine. So I'm not personally not looking at did they use the right colors here, but did they use the color in a way that the quilt speaks to me, or the quilt shows what the intention was? Is the pattern in the block still evident? So we have to look at that general appearance. The next thing is workmanship. And that's where we get down to the detail. Is it good workmanship? Do the seams match? In hand quilting, we of course are, if it's hand quilted, of course we appreciate the very, very fine stitches, but yet even if they are larger, are they consistent and even? I've been in shows that we've given blue ribbons to quilts that some people might say the stitches are too large, but yet they were very consistent. They were very even. They penetrate into the back. Is the applique well attached? Are the stitches invisible? In piecing, can you see the machine stitches showing through to the back because white thread was used to piece dark colored things? See? And then the last element is probably the design. Does the quilting enhance the background that it's on? Is the design evident? Is it well put together? So we have those three things that we have to judge sometimes in 3 to 4 minutes. So we don't have a lot of time, to be nitty picky on this.
Yeah.
The certified program has a fairly long lead time in which the candidate ultimately is required to fill out several questions dealing with all these issues. How color, what do you actually judge, and definitions of terms, and then also what the candidate has done in the way of continuing education to keep up, and then actually how much judging he or she has done, and how much assistance it shows, so they know the mechanics of the show.
How many certified judges do you think there are now?
I believe there's something between 65 and 70 certified now, but we have 10 or 11 in the candidate group now.
Interesting.
And what we're doing, see, when National Quilting Association was in existence, that organization had a show every year. And our candidates could go there and work with the judging operation. And also we had breakout sessions, which would talk about various things. But since that organization is no longer in existence, we don't have the set place each year. So what we're doing is we're partnering with other groups. For instance, last June, we partnered with the Minnesota Quilter Show in Duluth, Minnesota. And of course, they hired certified judges, and we had about 15 candidates there, as well as other people who are certified judges, and all worked in the judging room, had breakout sessions about certain aspects of judging. So that's what we're doing now to keep up. And we also have a 2-day judging class that is not required for certification, but is highly recommended. And candidates will come and spend 2 days working with certified judges through all of the process that they might encounter in becoming a certified judge.
How important do you think it is to one's career to be in shows with certified judges? Why is that important as part of the industry?
This is based on experience I've had over the years in judging along with non-certified judges. Certified judges have a consistency about what they do, and there is a very strong sense of the ethics of their, but we have a consistent we do and emphasize the non-prejudicial aspect of it. What I have found in many cases, if an organization hires a non-certified, and it's usually a teacher who's coming in to teach, that person tends to look more at what he or she does and her attitude about the technique than they do a non-prejudicial attitude about it. For instance, I judged one time with someone who was a very highly recommended teacher and designer and artist in fabric dyeing. And when the person arrived, she said, "I only look at color. I don't care about the rest." And the two of us who were certified had a real hard time keeping the focus on things like workmanship. There was another instance one time in which an acquaintance of mine called me, and she had been asked to judge at a very highly regarded national show. And she said, "I've been asked to judge and I've never judged before. What should I do?" So I think the assumption is that if you are a teacher, written books, done patterns, and teach around, you're qualified to judge a multitude of quilts. And very often that's not the case, because that person may only tend to look at that aspect of the quilt making process that they are familiar and comfortable with.
Very interesting. Hold on. So when you're a judge, do judges get paid? Are you what's the economic side of being a quilt judge?
Yes, we get paid, and we get if we're brought in strictly to judge, as opposed to if we come to teach and judge. If we're brought in strictly as a judge, then we have a daily rate, or some judges charge by quilt that they judge, so much per quilt, or a daily rate, plus all the related expenses that are involved, like transportation and lodging and meals.
Is being a judge something you can do full time, or is it kind of a part-time job you do with whatever other job you have?
It's less than part-time.
It's less than part-time.
Oh, yes. I don't even say it's part-time unless that part is very small. Well, for instance, there is a show that in the past a few years, I have been asked to judge every other year. And that's what that's what people tend to do, not, bring you back for every year.
Yeah.
I only had one judging last year, for instance, because all the quilt clubs in my particular area had me once, and I guess they're giving me a rest. Some years I might have three.
Interesting.
And I think it depends a lot on the area of the country you are, whether or not there's a lot of quilt activity there, because, it's economical to get someone who's more local than it is to ship someone completely across the country.
Now Yeah.
Now, if you're brought in to teach, well, then those other expenses are covered in transportation and things, and then the day that you teach is just an extra day, pay.
Yeah. Now, if you take the seminar, the 2-day seminar, does that cost money to take that seminar?
Have I?
No. If somebody decides to take the seminar, does it cost money? Does it cost money?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it costs money. I believe, if I'm correct, the 2-day seminar is probably around $150.
Oh, that's not bad.
And it's a 2-day.
Yeah, that's great, actually.
And I keep seeing on the internet, it's being taught all over the country now. Not every month.
Yeah.
But at least several times a year. It will be taught at an event.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And you don't have to be a candidate in order to take the class. Anyone can take it.
It looks like really fun. I'd love to take it. It looks really fun.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I have more things, and we're running out of time. So the Hoffman Challenge. Tell me what the Hoffman Challenge is.
Hello?
Hi, can you hear me? Did I lose you? You back?
I lost you.
Yeah, that happens. The Hoffman Challenge. What is the Hoffman Challenge?
Well, let me tell you very briefly. Back in about 1987, at a quilt show in Easton, Pennsylvania, a quilt maker, designer by the name of Betty Boink was right across the aisle from me. I was there as a vendor for the stencil company. And so one day, I looked up, and Betty had this bolt of fabric that she was holding in her hand and looking at it, and it was an Oriental Indian print, very bright. And that was not Betty's style, because I always described Betty as grandmother's flower garden and pastel fan, very traditional. Mm-hmm. So I said, Betty, what are you doing with that? She said, well, she saw it in a booth, and she kind of admired it, not knowing it was her style, but the vendor said that she thought it was the ugliest piece of fabric she'd ever seen, because she had it in her shop for 3 months and only sold a half yard. So we laughed about that, and so went about her business and looked up about 30 minutes later, and Betty was still contemplating that cloth. So I said, well, why don't you go buy a couple of yards for you and a couple of yards for me, and we'll go home and make something and then come back next year and show each other what we made. So that night at Show and Tell, we practiced our speech and put our cloth in brown paper bags and made sure we were last on the Show and Tell roster. Told it back and forth. I saw Betty, she said, etc. So at the very end, I said, well, why don't you all in the audience go buy a piece of cloth, see what you could make. I could have sold my piece 20 times trying to get back to my seat. So anyway, the next morning, there were people lined up outside the vendor booth to buy that cloth. She sold 2 bolts, ordered 2 more bolts from Hoffman, and put people on back order. So then we started getting questions saying, what are you going to do? And we decided we better formalize this. So we developed some rules, which were very simple. Couldn't use more than 2 yards in it, and had to have a recognizable amount in your piece. So then when I got home, because the fabric was a season before, I decided I better call Hoffman. I didn't know who they were. And so I called and went and told him, well, the person says, we want you to know that we don't make no ugly cloth out here. We didn't call it ugly. Somebody else did. So anyway, we made contact with Hoffman, and it just blossomed from there on. We got 78 pieces the first year. The highest was something like 835 pieces we got. They were brought into Betty's house. We juried out a sufficient number for the traveling exhibit, which was usually 40 in each exhibit. And then we had 3 judges to come in and judge those. It's still going. This will be the 30th year.
I know. It's amazing.
Longest running challenge. And I think the reason for that is our rules were simple. only had